Are you looking for a new whiskey adventure? Then climb in and buckle up. Get ready for one hell of a ride on the Whiskey Trip podcast with your host, Big Chief. Join in as he and his guests explore whiskey and dive into whiskey stories from around the world. Now here's your host, Big Chief.
Folks, you know, here on the Whiskey Trip, we celebrate more than just the pour in our glass. We celebrate heritage, tradition, and the stories that make this country what it is. That's why I'm proud to tell you about our friends at the Heritage Flag Company. These aren't just flags, they're handcrafted works of art built from whiskey and bourbon barrels that once held the spirit we all love. Every cut, every nail, every burn mark tells a story of patience and craftsmanship. Just like the whiskey we sip, these flags are bold, timeless, and full of character. Whether you hang one in your home bar, your man cave, or gift it to a veteran or first responder, a heritage flag isn't just decor. It's a statement. It says you believe in freedom, tradition, and the legacy we pass down. So saddle up, whiskey family, and head over to theheritageflag.com. Use code WhiskeyTrip10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Let them know Big Chief sent you. Because just like your favorite pour, the Heritage Flag Company is made to be shared, honored, and remembered. Now let's get on to the show. Hey, it's old Big Chief from the Whiskey Trip, and yeah, you're taking another ride with me. And folks, as always, I got a great show for you today. And I wanted to kind of take a break from distilleries and talk about grains and how farming leads to distilling and really the heritage with those grains. And there's this young lady in Virginia I met back in October of 2024, and her name's Shelley Sackier, and she works as the educator at Reservoir Distillery, and that's where I met her at. But she's working on the Virginia Heritage Grain Project, and I wanted to have her on today and talk about that project and the heirloom grains that they're working with to bring back some of the heritage in whiskey. Shelley, welcome to the Whiskey Trip, my friend.
Thank you. It is very, very good to be back here with you.
Well, I do have some whiskey in my glass, and I've got this bottle here that's from Virginia, and one of the distilleries you're working with right now. This is one of my favorite bottles, as you can see. It's called Old Kernel. And this is from Ironclad, my friend Owen King over there. And he does an amazing job with whiskey. If you haven't been to Newport News, Virginia, folks, and went to Ironclad, it's right down by the shipyard, so you might get to see a giant aircraft carrier being built or a nuclear sub. Go over there and check him out. I'm sure he would be delighted. But this is one of my favorite whiskeys to sip on, as you can see, Shelley.
It is a beautiful whiskey, and Owen is a very clever lad. So he makes some good hooch, and we are lucky to be working with him on this project as well.
Now, you do a lot with whiskey, but you're also a talented author and have written several books. Right behind me there, you can see Make It a Double as one of your books, and we're going to talk about that on the second half a little bit. But you got a very diverse background. How did you come about coming from author to traveling around the world to just jumping into whiskey?
That is a common question I get. A lot of people head scratch at that. Raised in Wisconsin on dairy farms and whatnot, and then I got into entertainment as a way to escape Wisconsin for a breath of fresh air. You know, I was smelling a lot of dairy air back there, but now, I wanted to see the world and taste the world, and got into touring with big band swing orchestras. It's a long, long story of many, many, many years ago, a whole different lifetime, and that was great fun. I was trained as a classical musician, but definitely got a taste for seeing other cultures and meeting people who spoke languages that I did not. And it was very humbling and also intoxicating. So I just wanted to feed off of that buffet of life a little bit more. I got married very early to an Englishman, and the deal was that we were going to be traveling back and forth from America to the UK to see his family. But we lived in America. And the first time that he took me there, he brought me to Scotland and did a little bit of a barrel hugging tour. And that story is very much interwoven into how my project came about, but it was very pivotal for me experiencing whiskey in Scotland. And I think because of a certain someone, which, and I will tell you the story about this, but one person can sometimes affect the entire course and direction of your life. And that happened to me in Scotland. And from that moment on, and I was, 22 years old, it changed everything. And I wanted to pursue how flavor was made, and whiskey was that vehicle in which I studied it. So, yeah, and then, babies came along, and you can't, I am not one of those women who has her shit all together. I just cannot do two things at once, and so I made a decision. Either I was going to continue on with the singing career, or I was going to raise competent children that at some point could maybe, learn to balance their checkbook and pay their taxes. That was my big hope for them. And so I thought I had to focus on the motherhood part of it. But as it happens with people who are creative, creativity just sort of starts to leak out of you in weird places. So like my hair turned a million different colors because I was like, I need something. And I was drawing on walls, and in the middle of raising these two little toddlers, I'm reading all these great stories, and thinking, oh, I can write a story. I used to write music, right? And songs are just basically a story in short form. It's all got a beginning, a middle, and an end. So a song is basically two verses, a bridge, and a chorus. It's a story. So I thought I can do that. I can write stories. And so that's just sort of how like all the book writing leaked into my life by accident, just by needing a venue. And then people weirdly published them. Nice for me. I was able to, I've written 4 books now. 3 of them were for middle grade and young adults, and every single one of them has whiskey in them. Because I'm thinking that my editors did not specifically read every line as carefully as they might have wanted to. But in my defense, it's all about engineering and chemistry and biology, science, right? So there's whiskey in everything. They're little Easter eggs. And then I got to Make It a Double, which is basically about my 25 years working in the whiskey industry and all the challenges that come with falling on your face 1,000 times, but learning from it, right? Just that resilience of having a passion that leads you every day out of bed to discover something new. And I had to put it on paper and let other people laugh as I was, learning. So there we go.
Well, you met Dave along the way somewhere, and started a new life, I guess, with Reservoir,
Yeah.
just by happenstance of writing a story. Folks, if you
Well, I mean,
haven't seen that episode, go back and listen to that episode with Dave and Shelley. But you met Dave, right?
I did. I was actually researching another book, and came to his distillery, and because I had cut my teeth on learning about whiskey in Scotland, and even was able to secure a tiny little apprenticeship at Bruichladdich, which was an amazing thing that I did years before I met Dave. I knew about Scotch, right? I had all sorts of knowledge about Scotch, but I knew very, very little about American whiskeys. I just found American whiskeys were too sweet for my tongue. And I came to him as I was researching for this book, and I really wanted to make sure that, technically I was, appropriately understanding the process, the American process versus the Scottish process, and what were the differences between the grains, what was the differences on the production room floors, things like that. Just doing my due diligence. And as I am entering Reservoir, this was around 2016 or something, 2015, 16, and I'm talking to him, and he's like, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm researching for a book. And he said, no, I mean, what are you doing here in this distillery? Why are you not working in a distillery already? And I said, well, I'm writing a book, right? I'm an author. That's my job. I'm writing. I have a job. And he said, well, I've got a great idea. You know so much about whiskey. I'm going to offer you a job. You can come work for a reservoir and you can make the job description of your dreams. Whatever it is that you want, you can do. And I'm just going to extract all of the knowledge that you have and we're going to use it for our company. And it was the most incredible gift anybody could ever give me to be able to create a job that pursued my passions, right? I mean, how many of us ever get an opportunity to do that and get paid for it? So, bonus. And during the first few years that I worked for Dave as the director of distillery education, I taught classes, I wrote all the technical manuals, things like that. It was then that I started coming to him with ideas for these projects, special projects I had. I just wanted to know how flavor was made, and so I was always chasing after, well, let's do some barrel projects, or let's do some grain projects, or let's do some blend projects. Let's do some warehouse climate studies. You know, anything that was going to unlock a little bit more science for me to understand how flavor was made, I was up for it. Okay, so I would come up with these harebrained, well, I didn't think they were harebrained, but I thought they were really exciting projects that he should consider, right? I'd put little package together and I would come to cross the threshold of his office and I'd be like, I got this great idea for a project that we're going to do in the warehouse, or we're going to do it with barrel staves, or, you know, something. And he would put up his hands and he'd say, how much is it going to cost? And the answer was always, it's too dear. We just don't have the money in order to fund something that would be really interesting scientifically, or just, you know, for whiskey nerds. We just don't have the money. So I was always very disappointed. And then about 3.5 years ago, Dave came to me and he said, well, I've got an answer for you. I've just sent you an application. It's for the Virginia Spirits Board Research and Education Grant Program. You can go get your money. They've got a pot of money. They are interested in projects that are helping out Virginia distilleries put together a grant proposal. And then I was like, what's a grant proposal? No idea. So that was my next quick Google. And then I ran back into his office and I'm like, how long do I have, you know, to learn how to do this and submit it? And I remember specifically, he spins around in his chair to look at his calendar and he goes, 7 days. So I'm like, okay, all right. Now I'm going to put the pedal to the metal on fast tracking some new, fresh skills for myself. So I looked at the projects that I really wanted to, that were most important to me to study. And for a very, very long time, I had been hearing stories from distillers who we worked with and who were friends of ours and all around Virginia and, you know, beyond our state's borders and whatnot, saying the same thing. We can't keep up with the big guys. We're losing shelf space. We don't have the same economies of scale in order to compete. And I was like, you know, well, maybe I could come up with some sort of project that was going to push back on all the competitive comparisons, you know. And so I put together this project, pitched it to the Virginia Spirits Board as like, we are going to study some of the nation's oldest grains used in the spirits industry. And everyone was thinking, oh, that's really cute. That's a very nice idea. Because I kept saying to everyone, I don't understand why we are not studying Virginia history, right? We have this beautiful piece of history in Virginia, which is that Virginia is the birthplace of American whiskey. And how many of us know that? And how many of us actually capitalize that as marketing? And if we are not studying all the possible things that could keep us afloat, we're wasting these great resources. So as far back as 1620, there was an Englishman by the name of George Thorpe, and the story is still somewhat in debate as we're looking for the scientific records. But as we know it, George Thorpe, back in 1620, he received corn from the Powhatan Native Americans and distilled that grain on his plantation, which was Berkeley Plantation outside of Jamestown. So there's some records that state that he made a strong drink with that corn. There are other journal entries that prove that there were whiskey barrels, or these 53-gallon barrel type equivalents that were on his plantation. So although it doesn't say that he specifically distilled it, everybody was distilling their grains back then. So it's not a very large leap to believe that that's what he did, but he has in his journal notings and whatnot that this was a very, very tasty thing. So we look at that as Virginians and state that historically, it gives us an opportunity to embrace and preserve our ancestral traditions, right? And I was constantly asking people, why are we shoring up Canadian rye and Midwestern wheat when we have farmers all around us in Virginia who are growing all of the grains that we are making our whiskeys from? So the project kind of bloomed out of the ground from necessity, as many ideas do. You are in desperate need of something, and then everyone starts brainstorming in order to how to solve it. Not that this is a solution, but it is a solution. It is a thought as to how we can remain competitive. So the story goes back when I was first starting to work with farmers. I remember being on the ground beneath the backside of a tractor and helping a farmer named Pete hook up a piece of equipment. And I said to him, so as I understand it, the soil is just like the gut microbiome. You want to put good things into it. You don't want it to be the same thing every time, and you don't want it leaking, right? And he was like, exactly, but who the hell cares about regenerative agriculture? And he seemed really frustrated, but he just sort of plowed forward and he said, you see this here patch of earth? Pointing to the ground, he's like, this patch of earth, this is what Virginia tastes like. This is what we need to be focusing on, and that's what your project should be preaching. Except, I was thinking that wasn't going to go down well with the Virginia Spirits Board, who granted me the money to create the Virginia Heritage Grain Project, because I was not there to proselytize farming, but instead to study these very old grains of Virginia. But I thought I was gonna still move with that. So I started approaching farmers, right? The project is three-pronged. We've got research and procurement, we have planting and harvesting, and then we've got the distillation and analyzation of this project. So first I had to convince farmers that they should be growing these old heritage grains. And I thought, easy peasy, I talk farmer. I grew up in Wisconsin. I was raised on a steady diet of Prairie Home Companion episodes and John Deere catalogs, telling these guys of my plans to resurrect the flavors of history by planting heritage grains. That was a statement that made most of them just fall back into their cornfields laughing, But I did convince a couple of them, and I recognized that I needed seeds, right? So, I was at first a little panicky about that. Where am I going to find all these heritage grains as we are researching them? But I also thought, well, you know what? I am a saver by nature. And you can call me a hoarder or call me thrifty, but I knew of another hoarding, thrifty organization out there, and it was called the USDA Germplasm. So these agronomists and seed savers across many different states and heritage organizations like Monticello, they agreed to give me some seeds. And, the amount of seeds that I at that point possessed was approximately the size of a box of Tic Tacs. But, at least I had seeds. I convinced a couple of farmers to plant those seeds for me. And then a few more joined up once they discovered that Virginia Tech had decided to do the same, planting these small seed plot trials across all three appellations of Virginia. So we do coastal, Piedmont, and mountains. And I was really excited about the opportunities to see what was going to happen with these seeds. I was also thinking about the fact that, Virginia is a really important place as the epicenter for this study. But I also wanted to understand that Virginia has had many different shapes in her life, right? And so I pitched to the board that we were not going to be using Virginia as it is outlined today. Rather, we were going to define Virginia as the earliest colonists first drew those maps, one where Virginia had a rather bloated waistline, right? And it was called the Virginia Territory. And this included land that we now recognize as Kentucky and West Virginia, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, parts of Pennsylvania. Some say even in some historical documents, there's a nod toward Michigan and Wisconsin, my home states, right? So I was very, very excited about all of this because it adds an element of inclusivity. It invites people to participate, and it made my job a lot easier in trying to find seeds. So, the sad thing is that, somewhere along the evolution of crafting American spirits, efficiency found its way in front of flavor. And yes, we should all be cognizant of the parameters of yield, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to produce a lot of product that produces minimal interest and doesn't stand out on the store shelf. And so I asked myself, what would make us stand out, right? And then I knew it. I knew exactly what it was. It was what that farmer told me, our patch of earth. So I remembered back to when I was 22 years old, and I was traveling around Scotland, and of course I took a distillery tour. And at the end of that tour, I was handed my very first dram of whiskey, and I was so excited, right? Oh my God. I took a sip, and then, oh my Godfathers, it was horrible. I spat it out. It was just terrible. And then I tried to convince everybody around me to spit this poison out as well. Oh, I swore I was never going to have another sip of whiskey again. Except a barkeeper heard me tell that tale, and he informed me that I had been dropped into the wrong end, the deep end of the flavor spectrum with, nary a swimming lesson in sight. And he was like, yes, of course, there's all that peat and smoke and brine, but there's also fresh cut flowers and vanilla and lemon cheesecake, and all those flavors come from the patch of earth from where those distillery ingredients are grown. And I remember thinking, wait, what? Dirt has flavor? Whose dirt, right? Because my mud pies as a kid tasted god-awful, and I thoroughly tested those guys. But this was my new rabbit hole, and it was one that I was going to dive down very, very deeply. So after reading more white papers than I have had hot dinners, and after a couple of really great conversations with soil biologists, who, by the way, dumbed it down to my 6th grade level needs. They speak such pretty science, but I I need to be able to understand it. They said I had to start thinking about soil and what's in it more along the lines of the ingredients in a cake. So they said that yes, at some point in your life, chances are you have decided to make a dessert, right? Could be cookies or brownies or cake, whatever it is. And you've been so bold as to dip your finger into the pot of baking powder just to see what all the fuss is about, only to have another question burble up to the surface, which is, why the hell am I putting something so foul tasting inside my batter bowl, right? When compared to like chocolate chips. But leave that sucker out, and then come to find out we have all made hockey puck pastries. So we know that some ingredients are more are highly impactful, really, really necessary, right? And they were telling me that in my conversations with them, they kept using the same words that I was having with all of my farmers, which was about the microbiome, right? And they were saying that we are now studying how bacteria and fungi, two words whose sound is a lot more yuck than yum, but how bacteria and fungi are interacting with the soil and can alter a plant's flavor and aroma chemistry. Now this, again, it's way outside my wheelhouse, but that that sort of landed me back on into an area that I was really comfortable talking about, a word that I was really comfortable talking about, terroir, right? You're familiar with what that is. I would
Very
assume that most
familiar.
whiskey, yeah, I would assume most whiskey drinkers are. But now, that I was armed with sort of my new fancy schmancy science, I had to find a way to language all of that into something useful and productive, and bonus if it was entertaining for other people that I was going to be working with. So, for instance, like last month, I had to speak to a pile of bakers sort of to level up their understanding as to just how impactful their choice of soil is in their, when it comes to their flavor profiles of whatever it is that they're making. So I give them an example. I'm like, picture this, bakers. We have ourselves two farms, and they are identical in every single way. They are side by side, divided by a county line, right? The only thing, they are going to plant the very same variety of wheat, and the only difference between them is their soil. So one wheat field is going to have its wheat grain, its seeds nestled in clay-laden earth, just rich with copper and molybdenum. And, that's an element on the periodic table. It's number 42, if you want to take a check. And then the other field is going to be sprawled across sandy loam that's just teeming with these microbial merrymakers, right? Yes, of course, they're both exactly the same wheat field, the same wheat strain, but one wheat field might bake up bread that is chewy and sweetly nutty, while the other one just sings with spicy tang and lovely aromas, right? And that's all because of the soil's personality. In other words, just like my Scottish barkeeper said, you can taste the terroir. Now, remembering this back when I was putting together my project just sort of filled me with this bubble of joy. And that is until one of my favorite mentors just pierced that bubble, and he said, yeah, just how long do you think that the board is going to continue to fund your little project as you are hunting for grains and planting and harvesting and distilling and barreling and waiting around in the warehouse for years during maturation, just sort of with your fingers crossed, hoping that something on the other end of it is going to come out tasting like a marmalade cosmopolitan. So I panicked a little bit, and I started cold calling people, which is what I do when I, am in a spot and quite desperate, but also determined. And this, after this session of cold calling people, I found a scientist who was working at the University of Kentucky, who was researching small batch distillation. So grain requirements that were so small, all I would need to give to her was a few pounds of grain rather than 1,500 pounds for a regular production room floor. It was, 5 pounds maybe. So now, all within one season, I could plant, harvest, distill, and send off that distillate to this international sensory panel that we created, who would analyze that new make spirit. So if the farmers found success in the field, then it got distilled. And if the sensory panel who was studying that distillate gave it a thumbs up, then we started, it went back to being planted in the farm fields again. If everybody agreed that it was a nightmare to grow and it tasted like cow pie patties, well, then now at least we know why that particular variety was kicked to the curb and is never spoken of in reverent tones. But we also pass these grains along to other grain users, culinarians in particular, bakers and chefs, who are providing valuable data for us and who are, lining up alongside the distillers in order to purchase these grains from these farmers. So, of course, there's still the issue of cost, and cost is not something that people with budgets can just kick to the curb. Big Ag chooses to research, develop, and grow based on yield, not flavor. But I mean, why does this have to be the status quo, right? We're a little bit turned around. So I have this quote that I cling to by entrepreneurial icon Seth Godin, who says, "We're not stuck in traffic. We are the traffic." If we know of a system, we can change the system, a system that is built by the system engineers. And so now, as a system engineer for this project, we have over 50 varieties of corn, wheat, rye, and barley inside of the study. And with these grains, we are adding diversity through crop rotation. We are providing a big stamp of cultural identity, and we are supporting the local grain economy. Right? These are really important things that we are crafting together the questions, right? Are these landmark historical flavors just waiting to be rediscovered? And are they worthy of being unearthed? The answers are, as diverse and wide as every time I shake a magic 8-ball. But I do know this. I know that we can bring value to our community with this project. And I know that we can bring competition to the marketplace because nothing tastes exactly like our little patch of earth. That's how the project came about.
Well, I think that's terroir, like you said, is the taste, the feel of the earth, the land, the trees, everything that grows there of that region. And that's why I always say, if you love the spice of life, make sure you try whiskeys from around the world, whether it be Kentucky, whether it be Virginia, Texas, from Japan, or from Scotland, as a lot of people enjoy, or India now. And I'm glad you guys are doing this. And in the second half, let's talk about, the kind of steps where you guys started, how many grains you were at, and where you're at today. I remember walking into a reservoir and talking to you that first time, and I was like, I have to talk to this woman just about grains, because and Dave said, wait till you meet Shelley, she's going to tell you about her project she's working on. And I was like, okay, and how many times have I heard that from different people? But then you started talking to me, and I was like, oh, me and her can geek out together about grain and corn and rye and barley. It's important to go back and find those. Like you said, I don't know why Virginia whiskey, or the Virginia Whiskey Guild, doesn't use that moniker, the birthplace of whiskey, in their
It does
marketing.
now.
They do
It
use it now.
does. Yeah,
I mean,
it does now.
it should be on every bottle of Virginia whiskey.
It should be. You're right.
That's something to brag about. I've talked about that many tastings I do, where whiskey started in America in Jamestown by George Thorpe, and I think it's important to point that out to people. I didn't know that they were using 53-gallon barrels back then. I thought they were using smaller barrels.
Don't quote me on that. I'm just recalling what I heard somebody
yeah.
else say when they toured the facility and saw replicas of what it was when they discovered it underground or in caves, or what it was. But yeah, I think actually Dave toured the compound himself, and we also have a really good spirits museum now that has been just made in Virginia, and they are talking about Berkeley Plantation and what it looked like, and just the history of whiskey in America in general. Fascinating stuff.
I'm a history nerd. I mean, to do a story, and hopefully maybe one day I'll do a podcast there in Jamestown and talk about that. I mean, I did one at George Washington's distillery with Steve up there, and what an amazing episode it was. I wish I did video back then, because I feel like I left a lot on the table that people couldn't see with his conversation of mine. But I'm looking forward
Clancy,
to... Go ahead.
Clancy Joe Conover is the curator of the Spirits Museum, and it is only a couple years old, and has now just found a permanent home. Used to be with Eight Shires Distillery, but sadly they closed down, and now it is with the Virginia Distillery Company, in a little south of Charlottesville. And so you can actually see it. They have displays, they've got pictures, they've got all sorts of things. And Clancy Joe, she's it's such an interesting person to interview as well. I think you'd make a wonderful podcast with her.
Well, listeners, we're up against the first half of Shelley. I have drank all my Old Kernel, not all of it. And like I said, I'm gonna have to reach back out to Owen and talk about this. And this is actually made out of an heirloom grain right here that Owen had found. And this was before the Virginia Heritage Grain Project. But
we got to talk about Owen in the second half with the project. Okay.
We will. Well, listeners, you stick with us. When we come back, we'll finish up this conversation, and then we got one amazing giveaway. As you can see, Shelley's book back there. That'll be part of the giveaway. That bottle of Reservoir sitting back there, and I'll have to let Shelley explain to what that whiskey is. I'm drinking a different whiskey on the second half, so you stick with us, and we'll be right back.
The Whiskey Trip is proudly sponsored by Guardian Coins, a veteran, family-owned and operated company that understand what it truly means to honor service, story, and tradition. Guardian Coins just doesn't make the challenge coins. They craft symbols of pride, legacy, and camaraderie. From military units and first responders to distilleries, brands, and special events, every coin is designed with purpose and built to last. Here at the Whiskey Trip, our official Whiskey Trip Challenge coin was brought to life by Guardian Coins, and it represents exactly what this ride is all about. Craftsmanship, community, and sharing a great pour with amazing people. From custom artwork to flawless finishes, Guardian Coins works with you one-on-one to turn your vision into something tangible, something you can hold, collect, and pass down. So if you're looking to create a coin that tells your story, whether it's from your unit, your brand, or your next big milestone, trust the folks who know how much that story matters. Visit Guardian Coins on Facebook and tell them Big Chief from the Whiskey Trip sent you. Now pour something good and let's get back to the ride.
All right, listeners, we're back for the second half with old Miss Shelley Sackier. Not old. I didn't mean to call you old. But somebody else is old.
I thought
somebody
it was
else
old.
is old today.
Yeah. Well, he's young. My Dave Cutno, the proprietor of Reservoir Distillery and the man who makes my heart thump, he is having a birthday today, so a shout out to our Dave.
Happy birthday, Dave.
I got big plans for him tonight. He's gonna have some fun, but I think he was hoping not to be in the office today. Sadly, he will be
Shelley,
in the office today.
This is a clean podcast now. Bunch of fun.
It is all about food and beverage. I'm telling you, it's all
beverage.
food and beverage fun.
Well, that's awesome. I love it. Before we went to the break, you were talking about the different varieties of grain that you're growing, and most people would think, hey, they're only growing grain, but it is the Virginia Heritage Grain Project, and you're doing, as you had said in the first half, wheat, rye, and barley
and corn.
As well as corn.
Yeah.
And to start this second half, I'm gonna sip on this right here. This little beauty right here. I gotta savor this. This is a wheated whiskey out of Virginia, out of Reservoir, and this thing, it is a little amazing bottle and stuff. 100 proofer, and I've been savoring this little thing.
Well, the wheat whiskey, it is 100%, not just a wheated whiskey, it's 100% single grain wheat. And the wheat whiskey, we always tell people, is just a beautiful, very gentle gem of a whiskey, right? I always suggest that people have that first before they have any other alcohol of the night or the day, if you're a day drinker, because those really delicate flavor profile, those molecules will just be lost to you'll have a palate that is deadened by any alcohol that comes before it. So wheat whiskeys, finding a 100% single grain wheat whiskey is rocking horse manure rare. It's just not something that is typically done because wheat is typically used as a softening grain in a mash bill, right? So it rounds off the harsher edges of some of the more aggressive grains that you find in a recipe. So it's silky. It makes whiskeys, that viscosity come through. It's very velvety, buttery, just lovely, lovely mouthfeel to it. I think the wheat is a great beginner bourbon, even though it's got no corn in there whatsoever. I'd like to refer to it as our beginner bourbon. It's good for people who have no experience with barrel aged whiskeys and whatnot, kind of entry level.
Yeah, I don't know that I love this because I think you have to have, I might disagree with you for a little bit there, is you have to have a very refined palate to really enjoy this, to where, like my wife, not that she's a new whiskey drinker, she's been drinking whiskey for a while now, but she enjoys a sweeter bourbon, a finished whiskey. Like I had a maple rye that came in the other day from my good friend Kevin Holy. That's just this stunning finished whiskey in one of his maple barrels, and it is just amazing. But I gave her a glass and said, "Hey, carry this glass inside for me," and it still had a lot of whiskey in it. I mean, a lot, a lot more that's in the glass right now, and when she came inside, she stayed outside for a little bit. And I don't know if she was out there hiding and drinking all my whiskey, but she came back in here and she's like, "Here's your glass," and it's empty. And I was like, "Hey, what are you doing? What happened to my whiskey?"
Where'd my liquor go?
But I found that I believe she likes those higher proofs that are very viscous and oily, and a sweetness to it, like you said, that most bourbons have very sweet sometimes, and that fits her palate. And maybe it's just her palate, but she really loves that. This right here is more of a, like you said, it's very soft. It's I could drink this before a steak dinner very easily. It is it's almost like a dry red wine to me,
Oh, nice.
and it opens up my palate. Like you said, I don't want to start with something that's 120 proof. I want to start with this right here and sip on this. And what a beautiful whiskey it is, though. But you guys are starting to grow these grains. Was it hard to find a bunch of farmers to say, "Hey, I want you to grow this grain that it's not going to yield as much as the modern day grain"?
Yeah, that's an argument that we get from a lot of farmers. Certainly, our project, the Virginia Heritage Grain Project, invites farmers who are on the spectrum from conventional growers, right? They grow commodity crops, they monoculture. That's been their past experience. They grow for, Purdue, whatever it is, just thousands and thousands of acres. We offer them an opportunity to participate, and all the way through the spectrum of organic certified farmers, right? And then everyone in between. So you've got the, regenerative agriculture, and you've got the organic growing but not certified. Anybody who wants to participate in planting some of these grains for the project is welcomed, open armed, no judgment. But we hear from a lot of farmers that they are losing their livelihood. Some of them are saying things like, "We've got 8 years worth of growth on these lands, and then we're toast. We can't grow anything any longer." And you obviously you have to think about the health of the soil. So much of this project talks about soil because soil is the first author of flavor. This is really important. And when we talk about distillers looking for a way to gain some sort of a competitive edge on the market shelves, we're telling them that if we are partnering with these local farmers, right, and we are thinking about the health of the soil, what's inside of it, and how that soil is creating this remarkable flavor profile in your end product, whether that is a whiskey or it's your bread or it's, whole berries on a chef's plate, that flavor profile is proprietarily protected via geography. That is our marketing argument, is to say you cannot duplicate somebody else's patch of earth and what that soil creates in the plant that it grows. So for the last 3 years, the project sees interest from farmers because it focuses on soil health and on regenerative agriculture, and it gives them an opportunity to grow a product that is reflective of their values, right? And provides some potential to protect their livelihoods, because none of them, they're all like, well, it's either I join your project or we sell the land for a data center. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. It's an idea, this project's idea is very appealing to culinarians, chefs and bakers, the small number that are testing grains for us, because they know that these grains are nutritionally more dense, right? They elevate what's on the plate and the flavor that's on the plate. And it provides this big stamp of cultural identity, which is important to set them apart as well. And then it's one that distillers are willing to explore because we are discovering through the beauty of science, and thank God for Michigan State University, who is studying heritage grains. We've sent samples of our heritage grains to them, but they are studying a whole lot of them. But we are beginning to understand that the varieties have higher ethanol yields, they have higher hearts yields. It's very important to a distiller, and also they are much higher in phenolic acids, right? All different kinds of compounds that are the precursors to flavor. All of this, despite the fact that the yields, these heritage grains are lower yields in bushels per acre in comparison to commodity grains. So we are not going for volume, we are going for value. And these arguments fit the necessary needs of each one of those branches, right? Farmers and grain makers. And then also when we talk about, or grain users, we also talk about consumers. We know that consumers are wanting to know, where's their food coming from, who's growing it, what impact does that have on the environment, and does it come with a compelling story or an opportunity to try something that's so different that you can't find anywhere else, right? So there's a very compelling part that says this partnership, this farmer who's growing this one-off grain, this one-off variety of wheat or corn or barley or rye, you're never going to get to try that. You might never get to try that anywhere else because it's part of this project, and we're going to see, does it grow well? Does it respond well? Is there consumer interest in it? Do chefs like working with it? Do bakers like making bread with it? Do distillers like the flavors, or brewers like the flavor? So basically, this project is constantly answering the question, what does Virginia taste like? And, I think hella good. But not to say that every single one of these varieties is going to turn out to be something crown-worthy. We recognize that some of them will have been kicked to the curb for a very good reason. All right, there are all the considerations that a farmer has. Is this grain going to grow well in my climate, with my soil, with my pest challenges or disease challenges, or the drought or flooding that we typically have, right? We're all very aware of how we have to look at the shifts in our climate, and farmers are hyper aware of the fact that they are having to look at what are they putting in the ground and how well is it going to respond to the pressures that are forced upon it. It might be different than it was 10 years ago. The interesting thing about the heritage grains in comparison to the commodity grains is that they are already these land race varieties. You know what a land race is, right? Where a variety has been grown to basically fit the climate that it's within. So it already has these built-in defenses against, pest resilience and drought and disease. It just does so much better. Heritage grains tap roots are deeper. Their root system is much more complex. They're more nutritionally dense. Their flavor profiles, like we mentioned, are just much more expansive. There are a lot of reasons why farmers would be interested in planting these particular grains. They can ask for more money for these grains because they are specialty, right? If you look at the commodity prices, stock prices for what you're getting, pounds per barrel, price per barrel, it's embarrassing what it is that we are paying farmers. It's embarrassing. So
the grain prices really since the 1970s haven't risen. Why fuel prices have risen. But we can't even talk about what a piece of equipment costs today compared to what it was in the 70s. Pieces of equipment cost more than my whole house cost. It is just crazy.
yeah, and
What farmers are having to go through.
specifically today when we're looking at fuel prices, right? And and fertilizer prices. I know that, right now we're going through some treacherous times. I have conversations all day long with farmers, and I am on farm visiting their sites and handing them their grains and looking at their fields, and they are worried. They are
Well,
really
they should
worried.
be. They surely should be because of what the world is going through, and in my other line of work that I do, we watch fertilizer really, really closely to ensure our food that comes out of America, our grain belt, isn't affected without fertilizer for those large producing crops. It just doesn't happen. The other thing farmers are having to deal with is these large corporations that make equipment are putting proprietary technology in those tractors, those combines, that they can lock that, even if the farmer paid for the combine themselves. They paid it for, let's say they paid $1 million for a tractor. They pay for it themselves, and then the company like John Deere, Massey Ferguson, any of these companies, they can lock that tractor up and make it not go anywhere, because if they try to work it on themselves or modify it for their farm, as they did for 100 years now, they no longer can do that, and they can't even use their piece of equipment.
Yeah, they
So,
have problems on the equipment side. They have problems on the seed side, right? Like Monsanto, seeds that have been genetically modified and specifically crafted by certain seed companies. These farmers are struggling with that kind of a thing. The Heritage Grain Project, where we might be starting off with, the challenge of a really, really small amount of seeds. So we might get from the USDA germplasm 5 grams of seeds or 10 grams, or like Monticello very graciously has given us 4 different varieties of 500 seeds each. And each year we're replanting and replanting all of these seeds to finally have enough to put on farm for these larger farm grow outs. But the interesting thing is that when we talk about how farmers are viewing the differences in seeds as a product that they are then putting onto kitchen tables, right? When they're looking at, well, is this cattle food? Is this animal food? Is this people food? There's, if they're trying to make people food, I have come to think of heritage grains and commodity grains in the same way that I understand the difference between whole foods and ultra processed foods. This is maybe uh, is a little bit of a hot topic, I think, for some of my farmers and certainly some of my family members. But, one is full of flavor and nutrition and resilience, and the other is efficient. My dad used to have this saying after any meal that wasn't particularly memorable or satisfying. He would say, it fills a hole, right? Heritage grains are alive with diversity, the way food used to be before we stripped it down for shelf life and for speed. Commodity grains, they have been scientifically processed into sameness. So they've been simplified, they've been homogenized, they've been bred for uniformity and yield rather than nourishment. Efficient, yes, but hollow. So the Virginia Heritage Grain Project isn't about nostalgia. It's not just about tasting the past. It is, partially it's an exciting thing, but it isn't just about tasting the past. And it definitely isn't about filling a hole. It is partly about putting the whole back into our food system.
I
So
love it. Now you heard that cork pop out of this
I
bottle,
did, I did.
and I drink all my wheat whiskey, which is I love it. And I
You
had
know where
poured
you
a
can
big
get
glass of
more.
it. I do. I might be the luckiest man on the face of the earth. But I'm drinking this lucky sucker right here. This amazing bottle of whiskey right here. Yes, listeners, it's another bottle of Reservoir, but this is pretty special. And not that this has any of the Heritage Grain Project in it. And I can't wait to get some of Heritage Grain Project just to try and review. But this is something that's born out of Dave's brain, right?
Yes, yes, it is. It's called the Holland series, and we have three versions, three expressions within this Holland series. There's Holland's Ghost, and Holland's Blade Rummer, and then Holland's Milkman, which is what you have there. And it was an answer to a question for a barman here in Virginia, a bar owner. He still owns the largest whiskey bar in Virginia, and he came to Reservoir and he's like, "I'm all out of my Dusty. I want this 1960s feel back. I can't get any more of it." And Dave's like, "Well, come on in. Let's do some taste testing." And they built this mash bill, which is 70 corn, 15 wheat, 15 rye, in order to mimic, right, the same profile of this guy's favorite whiskey from back when. And it was really close, but it wasn't exactly. And that's because we were missing the barley component of it, which meant we had to go seek that out. And that's where we decided to finish that 70 15 15 recipe, that mash bill, inside stout casks. For the Holland's Ghost, it was a stout cask, a stout beer cask. And then for the Milkman, it was a milk stout cask. And for the Blade Rummer, I'm sure you can probably guess, we finished it in a 25-year-old Jamaican rum cask. So they all have these lovely finishes on them, and it makes them super, super special. To me, the Milkman just tastes like a Tootsie Roll in spirit form, in whiskey form. It's just...
I can get that. It does have that dusty taste to it to me, that old school whiskey taste that I've had some 1960s whiskeys, 1950s, some pre-prohibition whiskey I've tasted has the same, just this. And when I say funk, it's not a bad thing. It
No, I like funk.
wonderful to me. It's wonderful. Whenever going back to the grain project, the Heritage Grain Project, was it hard to get distillers on board with this and say, "Hey, I want you to step out of the normal and try something new with me, and take this whiskey trip, if we could say, and make something different that you're making"? Was that hard?
It is hard. It is a continuous process. So the Virginia Spirits Board, who granted me the funds from the Research and Education Grant Program to put this project together, I knew in the back of my mind that they were going to want to have some sort of a deliverable, right? Some sort of ROI, so that they would recognize that year after year. And we have just been funded for our fourth year, which is wonderful. Obviously, they believe in the project, but they're going to want to have something tangible to say, this is what we did with this money, with this time, with all of these people. So the project is going to have, at the end of it, 10 partnerships of Virginia farmer and Virginia distiller partnerships, where each one of them are going to decide to work together and choose a grain that they're going to revive. Farmer's going to grow it, harvest it, and then the distiller distills it, barrels it, and then each one of them, of those 10 partnerships, is going to be housed on a project bottle, a unique bottle sharing the same label. And that label is going to identify the farmer, the distiller, and the grain that they chose, the story of the grain, so that we can sell these to people around in our states, around our area in the mid-Atlantic, and say, look what we're doing. Look at this economic grain chain, this value grain chain that we are creating, how we are working to strengthen our local economy, our regional and local partnerships, how we are invested in one another's future and in one another's success. We need to stand strong and understand that there is so much space in that Venn diagram where we got to pay attention to that shared space, right? So if a farmer is going to be providing us something that gives us a competitive edge for our projects, we have to give the farmer support to say, at the end of that harvest, we are going to be there to buy those grains. And then the consumers have to stand behind it and say, the environment means something to me. History means something to me. Trying something different means something to me. I want to support this project. I want this to happen in my own state or in my own area. And they're always voting with their dollars, right? So it's sort of the chain of command of convincing people is ongoing and ever present, right? Whether it's a farmer or it's a grain user or it's the consumer, messaging is really important. We have to take a look at how can we, as small businesses, as small farms, as craft distillers, as small restaurants and small bakeries, all survive? Well, first you must create a product that is uncopyable, right? And so again, these products are proprietarily protected via geography because of that patch of earth. So if we get the farmers to pay attention to the soil, we have longevity of their livelihoods, we have longevity of the soil. The soil gives us something so amazing. The heritage grains are unlike anything that you've ever tasted before. Those people who are purchasing those grains can then explore and experiment with them. We're working with chefs in Virginia and now outside of Virginia. I just had a marvelous meeting with a couple of chefs and beverage directors up in New York. Dan Barber's Blue Hill Stone Barn Center. They have a couple of restaurants. Dan Barber's a very famous chef, but he's like a regenerative chef. He thinks about food in a way of like, let's use things that are normally discarded. Let's pay attention to making our plates alive with joy and deliciousness and not just self-selecting the very few ingredients that are forced upon us. Let's talk to farmers about what is your land wanting to grow, right? These guys are going to be testing a lot of our grains to see how they work in their kitchens and in their fields. So we're trying to pass this message of this project across state lines to many, many different people who are having the same problems we are, survival. So we all want to be able to do something that we are passionate about, that we love. We want our work to be impactful and important to us. And we also have to care about, the patch of earth that we're all standing upon so that we have a tomorrow. So I think this project tries to touch upon a lot of those things. Convincing people becomes easier the more that we have participation. The story grows with enthusiasm and excitement, the more people that we have providing their own stories of success.
Well, so you partner with these these distillers, these farmers. When will the first bottles of this? Because there's already been some distilled.
Yeah.
When will the first bottles be available for this?
Yeah, this is exciting. The fact that we are we have just finishing our third year and starting our fourth year of planting, and knowing that we started off with like 5 grams or 10 grams of each one of these beautiful varieties that just have the most amazing names. I wrote a list so I could like things like Cox Prolific and Virginia Gourd Seed and Highland Horsetooth and Woods Dixie and Strawberry Dent, right? They're just such different, those are just corn names, but like the wheats, there's Purple Straw and Red Fife and Red May. We've got Sangaste Rye and Seashore Black Rye. They're just so many beautiful names. They're not a jumble of numbers and letters or anything like that. But starting off with these varieties, we put them in the ground. We work with Virginia Tech, who are doing the small seed plot trials for us. And then if we have success, then we're moving them further and further along on different farms, larger plots, until we have enough to go onto Reservoir's production room floor. So we're the test facility. We have to, of course, first we have to go through the sensory panel, right, to make sure that in distillate form, those grain-derived flavors are approved by that sensory panel who says, yeah, we can envision, they sort of crystal ball that distillate and say, this is something that consumers would be interested in. Those grain flavors are really good, even if they've never had those grain flavors before, right? Normally we're just tasting yellow dent number 2 corn, but these things have a whole different flavor palette. So these panelists are analyzing the grain-derived flavors in the distillate, giving their thumbs up, and that's where we really started off. So farmers give us a yes, the sensory panel gives us a yes. Then we finally make enough, like 1,000 pounds, we put it into Reservoir's distillery, and we make one 53-gallon barrel of that. We take off a little bit, off the still and put it into our distillate library. And then we invite distillers to come and do organoleptic evaluation themselves to see, do they like what they're smelling, what they're tasting? Is this a grain that maybe they would want to try and incorporate into their portfolio, right? Not just like we're going to wipe out all of our previous grains and then only make heritage grains. That's not the project's aim. It's the project is saying, consider putting one into your portfolio to tell a story of Virginia. And so that distillate library is being created. And then also those 53-gallon barrels, which people can come back and taste and view and observe during the oak curve of maturation until finally, it will be ready for bottling. Those barrels are not specifically crafted for bottling, but more for organoleptic evaluation. Then once we have that done, then we have a farmer grow it out again, and then that's where we do these pairings, a farmer and distiller pairing. And so we have 4 of those pairings already committed. 3 of them all have gone through the entire process from planting and harvesting, distilling, and barreling. So we've got 3 53-gallon barrels from 3 different distillers already in warehouse maturing. And we've got a 4th one that's coming in a couple of months. And then probably by the end of the year or early 2027, we'll have another 4 partnerships with what's going in the ground right now and what's coming out of the ground probably around June. So it's very exciting. So, having those 10 barrels and once those 10 barrels are all matured and bottled, they're going to be, I'm loosely referring to them at the moment as our revival series. I just kind of think it's got a catchy name. We'll see if it sticks. But, we're looking at labels. People have an opportunity to try those partnered spirits and see what those old grains tasted like. And, does it appeal to their palate? Is it something that they want to support? The story, maybe it's just a one-off, but supporting those partnerships. And then, of course, we're working with a lot of different chefs and bakers around the state as well to support those farmers' harvests by incorporating these grains into menus of chefs and into the bakeries that are around here, so people can taste it in all different kinds of formats.
I love it. I think you should call it Old Time Revival Series. That's Old Time Revival. I mean,
Old Time Revival Series. I do like it.
That has a ring to it. That has that ring to it where you're like, woo, baby.
Okay, so don't trademark that in case I need it, right?
I think that works. It'll get people into that. Even if you put Virginia with it, I tell you what, I'm excited about this project, Shelley. And I'm excited to try some of this whiskey from these distillers. Because you named some of the distillers before, and I drank from Ironclad, but Catoctin.
Right. Owen King from Ironclad, he actually barreled our very, very first, was one of the first partnerships with a farmer who's in Culpeper by the name of Craig Jepson. He and Craig grew and distilled seashore white corn. Why am I forgetting it? I see I've got all these corn names. Nope, Sea Island white corn. That's what it is. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, obviously coastal sounding grain. But Owen just got that into the barrel probably maybe a month or 2 ago. And then Cashel Distillery, Todd Emmer, he has put into barrel Pungo Creek from Sam Hartman, the farmer Sam Hartman, Buena Vista Farm. And, can you still hear me?
Yep.
I think my earbuds died. If you can hear me, that's great. And Pungo Creek, for Todd Emmer and Buena Vista Farm. And then Reservoir has partnered with a terrific farmer out in the Shenandoah Valley by the name of Stuart Dedamore. His family has been growing Cox Prolific like 200 years ago when it first came into Virginia, which was really exciting. And he didn't know that until we gave him this grain. He's like, this sounds really familiar to me. I think my family grew this in around Charlottesville, around Monticello. So we're exploring that history as well. Just so cool. So Cox Prolific Corn is with Reservoir, and then coming up in this very shortly in the spring, once we have the wheat harvested, we've got Red May, which is going to be barreled by Becky Harris at Catoctin Creek, and that is grown by Timmy Scott, her beloved farmer from Glebe Farm. I just love that guy. I mean, I love all the farmers. These people are amazing humans. Amazing.
I love that I've had all these folks on my show before.
I know. Is it?
I think, did you go down my list and say, okay, who's Big Chief worked with?
Virginia is such a beautiful family of farmers and distillers, just creative people, and it's hard not to bump into one another at the same conferences and, at the family shindigs and all that. There's a lot of opportunities we have to get to know one another and support one another.
Well, I love it. And what a great conversation we've had, Shelley. And we're up at the end of the episode here. But before we leave, we do have a giveaway. And I've been thinking about this giveaway for a while now. Behind me, I got that bottle. Shelley, you want to tell us about that bottle right there?
Yes, the bottle, it's such a pretty bottle as well. This is our very fancy, this is our COVID bottle. It is Francois Voyer is the name of a cognac company, of course, out of France. And during COVID, we all kind of got bored of being holed up and secluded. And so we started doing a series of Zoom calls between one another. Now, Francois Voyer has been making cognac for, generations. And Reservoir has been making whiskey since, 2008. So we had a lot to learn from these distillers. What we ended up doing was tasting each other's spirits and then trading the barrels that we liked most. So we wanted to finish our products off in each other's barrels. So Francois Voyer ended up sending us a limousine barrel of one of their most beautiful cognacs, and we put a rye in there, which was I think it's a wheated rye maybe, or a rye wheat. I can't remember the recipe, but they ended up taking one of our rye barrels and they finished their cognac in there. And so after we all did a little bit of science, measuring the amount of weeks and months of the time finishing in those casks, then we each bottled our finished spirits, and we shared the same label so that we could reflect this partnership, and then they all sold. So that was very much a one-off, but an incredible opportunity to learn from people who are far more clever than we are.
You're pretty clever. So what we're going to do is we're going to give away that bottle right there. One of Shelley's books signed for the giveaway winner. Make it a double. One of my rocks glasses, and then one of my whiskey trip caps. That giveaway is going to run all week long, as always. So what you're going to have to do to win this giveaway, and I'll pick a winner on Monday evening. I don't know the time because I'm going to be out of country, but I'll make the announcement of the winner. But I want you to put an emoji of some corn or any other kind of grain, wheat or rye or some kind of grain. Tag 4 friends. I want you to follow Reservoir Distillery.
And the Virginia Heritage Grain Project.
And the Virginia Heritage Spirits organization. Follow those two as well as the Whiskey Trip. Share the post every time, and then make sure you like the post. I keep forgetting to tell people to do that, but like it and share it. So an emoji of some kind of grain, a wheat, a corn, a rye, if a barley. I don't know if there's an emoji of a barley, but share an emoji of one of those. Tag 4 friends. Follow the Virginia Spirits organization. Follow Reservoir Distillery, and then follow the Whiskey Trip. All week long. You got to be 21. You got to reside in the United States. I think that's an amazing giveaway for you listeners. I'm trying to give back more than I take. A lot of distilleries gift me whiskey and say, hey, Mike, take this home with you. Share it with your listeners. Share it with friends. And this is one way to do that so that you can share it with your friends. gets great whiskey in other people's hands. Shelley, thanks for being on the show, taking your second time as being a guest on here. I'm sure that there'll be a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth time. But any last words to listeners out there?
Yeah, I think listeners should recognize just how lucky they are to have you at the helm in whiskey education, and that despite the fact that you are incredibly humble about what you provide to this industry, we would be so lost without you. And you do give back an enormous amount, and so much of it comes from your heart. So we're really lucky. We all thank you for your leadership and for your enthusiasm and just for your joy. Thank you.
Well, I'm a happy guy. I mean, there's nothing to be sad in life about. If you can't find some humor in life and some happiness, you need to look elsewhere for some. Because I'll tell you what, it's out there. You just got to find it. Find me an old little feather if you want to find some humor, for sure, my little brother. Shelley, thanks again for being on the show. Where can listeners find more information about the Virginia Heritage Grain Project and yourself?
The most interesting and up-to-date information is on our Instagram account, and it is, I think it's a VA Heritage Grain Project, and we have all different kinds of highlighting that we're doing, what we're doing with the grains and with all the people behind the project. That's the most exciting thing. So search for us there on Instagram.
Awesome. I love it. Make sure you check out Reservoir Distillery, their website. Make sure you check out the Virginia, they got a site on there for that. Shelley actually has a website as well. I know she didn't want to tell you about herself, but Shelley Sackier, Sackier at .com. Check her out. Order one of her books if you don't win this book. She's got some other books that are amazing. Make sure you check out her stuff. And then check out Virginia Spirits page too, and learn about the Virginia Whiskey Guild, learn about the distillers there. They got over 80 distillers in the state of Virginia. I think that's super amazing. I don't think a lot of people realize that that's out there for them when they visit Virginia and stuff. I know when I go there, I try to take advantage and go to as many distilleries as I can and visit and make the most of my time with them. And they always all open up their doors for me. If not, I just come over there and put my big boot up against the door and kick it down. Come on in and start drinking whiskey with them. They're like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "I'm the big chief, baby." Scoot on over. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Kind of a step away from the distillery side of the house and to the farmer side, and connecting the two and learning about grain and the heritage of grains and what the great work that Shelley is doing. She's got a brilliant mind. If you haven't read this book, if you haven't learned about her, check her out. I'm telling you, maybe you'll see her on some other shows. Hopefully, I think more people need to talk to her and pick her brain about that. I'd like to see this spread across the nation, from Virginia to other states like Texas, like Kentucky, that used to be part of Virginia. Just one last thing, Shelley. I wanted to tell you this, that my family, the Hyatt side of my family, came up through the Virginia and up past D.C., pretty much between Charlottesville and D.C. area. There's a Hyatt run up there. It's a little creek. But my family come up through Jamestown. There was actually another part of my family that owned a plantation there right in Jamestown, or not in Jamestown, but on the Colonial Parkway today. But it's called the Ring Plantation if you drive the Colonial Parkway. But if you go up through Jamestown and then you go up into the mountains a little bit, the Hyatt family went up there. They named a creek after the Hyatts. And then after the McPhee brothers went and surveyed Kentucky at the time, which was Virginia, my family moved west, and right outside of Lexington, there's a Ben Hyatt cabin. There's a historical site. And then they moved on to Indiana and then throughout the Midwest and the South. So my family is very, very tied to Virginia and to the heritage there. And I'm sure there was a Hyatt at some point that was distilling his own whiskey.
Now, wouldn't that be fun to do a little historical research on? You got some deep roots here in Virginia.
I would have to dig, I think, pretty deep. But I do have some historical ties through both sides of my family to Virginia, and it's amazing to go back and look at this, and the history that is buried there that people were ashamed of at Jamestown and even at Mount Vernon with George Washington's distillery. And finding out this heritage and finding these heirloom grains that are non-GMO, genetically modified grains that these gigantic companies are forcing on farmers and stuff and signing them into these lifetime contracts. If you haven't dug into this, listeners, and learn what farmers have to go through, do it. I know I'm not talking about politics here. I'm just talking about life for a farmer. So it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I hope you really dig into this episode and you've learned something from it. Thanks again, Shelley. Once again, thanks for being on here. But listeners, you know where you can find Old Big Chief. You can find me at The Whiskey Trip on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, and now on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Watch this full video and leave some comments on here. Leave me some comments. Tell me what I can do better. Tell me what distilleries you would like to find. Tell me what was the most interesting thing in this episode that you learned. I'm sure Shelley would love to look back at that and say, man, I didn't think about that, or I thought about this. Or if you have a question for her, ask it.
Yes, please.
That's how we learn more. That's how we dig in, and we like to
That's
research
how we
stuff.
grow.
Yes, indeed. So check out this episode on Apple Podcasts with The Bourbon Life. If you're listening to me, listen to Mark and Matt from The Bourbon Life. They always, in this whole entire crew, make sure you listen to their episode. If you're not listening to them, give them a listen. And if you like what you're listening to on there, on Spotify or Apple, leave us that 5-star review, as I always say. Leave us those comments on there on Apple Podcast. Those comments, those 5-star reviews open up doors to distilleries like Reservoir, like Ironclad, like Catoctin, like Castle. It opens up those doors to distilleries and gets great whiskey in my hands for me to sip on and tell you about, and also gets great guests in my on my show. Guests like Shelley. This is how I meet people right here, because people say, hey, you need to go visit this distillery in Richmond, Virginia. If somebody wouldn't have told me that, I would have never met Shelley. I would have never ventured up 2 hours from where I was at to go up to Richmond and meet this lady. And I didn't go up there to meet her. I went up there to record with a distillery, but that is how these doors open up, and I get to meet more people and get the word out there about my show and get the word out there about these projects like the Virginia Heritage Grain Project. So leave those reviews. Once you make those reviews on there, if you're going to do it, go ahead and copy it and take it over to my Facebook page on the Whiskey Trip, and leave those over there too. I love getting reviews on there. It makes me excited. It makes me keep going down the road. It keeps the Whiskey Trip online. Makes me want to record more shows for you and give you more content. I really do appreciate it. Put in for the giveaway. One last thing for everybody. I'm going to be at the Texas Whiskey Fest. If you haven't purchased tickets, right, you got 4 days left to do this for. Make sure you go ahead and buy those tickets. Come out there. I'm going to have Little Feather with me. I'm going to have a whole bunch of dudes, my warriors from the Poor Decisions Rick House out there with me. I'm going to have Miss Viv with me. We're going to be having a great time out there at Bee Cave at Start Hill Ranch in Texas. Jake puts on a great show. I know you listened to him last week. Buy some tickets. Come out there and see me. Come up, shake my hand, drink some whiskey with me. It's all Texas whiskey. So keep listening, keep showing up. I'll keep doing these giveaways. This is Old Big Chief, and thanks for taking this ride with me, baby.